Hello there, everyone. Guten Tag zusammen, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. This tutorial is going to look at the listening paper, and I'm going to give you my best tips for tackling the listening exam. We're going to look at the listening exam overall, and so yeah, very generally, and so this should be useful for all students. Just to introduce myself briefly first, I'm Dhananjay Talwar, and I studied modern languages, French and Italian specifically, for my MA at the University of Cambridge. I graduated in 2015, and I've been an educator for most of the time since, and a full time tutor now for at least 6 years. I'm really passionate about languages, very fond of them and language learning, and I've learned more than 20 different languages myself to different levels, but at least 9 to fluency, of which one of them is German. I did German for GCSE successfully first, before then practicing a lot with friends and others. Um, and I love learning languages myself, and likewise helping students to reach their own language learning goals and giving them the tools to allow them to do just that. And so far, I've helped more than 500 different students achieve or exceed their target grade in GCSEs or iGCSEs for languages as a full time tutor. I've taught 8 languages so far for GCSEs or iGCSEs, and several of those at higher levels as well. It's been a great, very rewarding journey and continues to be so. So, these are the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards: 4 for GCSE German and 2 for iGCSE German. You should be aware, of course, of your own exam board as early on in your preparation as you can be, because there are naturally differences from exam board to exam board. In this video, though, we're looking at the listening paper overall, the listening exam overall. And so the tips and the material here should be useful for all students, regardless of your exact exam board. So these are the listening exam question types, or the main different types of questions that you can find in a listening exam for GCSE or iGCSE modern languages. So they include gap fill questions, matching up questions, multiple choice type questions, questions where you have to identify the correct statements, questions where you have to answer in English, and questions where you must answer in German. And down at the bottom there, this is a new inclusion for certain exam boards, only AQA and Pearson edXL GCSE, from 2026 exams onwards, the dictation task. And I'll go through these in a bit more detail later on. We'll look at general techniques, so how you can prepare as much as possible, what you should focus on in the actual exam for listening. I do look at every single one of these question types, all 6 of these, from gap fill questions down to the questions where you've got to answer in German, in a different video. So I really recommend watching that. And if you're doing the dictation task, because that is new, of course, so if you're sitting the AQA or Pearson edXL GCSE exam boards, then I do have another video on the dictation task only. So I recommend watching that one as well if it's relevant for you. Here, though, we're going to focus on the listening exam generally. And I'm going to give tips on preparing, tips on avoiding common pitfalls in the listening exam. So the listening paper is, of course, a timed written paper, naturally. The questions are usually multiple choice. We saw on the previous slide some of the most common question types. There are others that could potentially come up too, but those ones are perhaps the most common ones that you'll see time and time again if you're going through past papers. Questions are largely multiple choice, but they can also ask you to write short written answers in either English or in German. So that's something to be aware of too. The questions will all be based on an audio, and as a student, you'd hear that audio exactly twice. You'd hear everything in that audio exactly twice. If you have to do a dictation task, then each sentence in the dictation would be heard 3 times. So the dictation is the only exception, and that's only for certain students as well. Not everyone has to do the dictation. Only those doing AQA or Pearson edXL GCSE, currently. Otherwise, you would hear every single thing in the audio exactly twice. so it'll all be repeated. And that's something that you should be aware of and try and make the most of too. Okay, here are some top general tips for tackling the listening exam for German GCSE or German iGCSE. So make sure you read the instructions for every question thoroughly. The first thing I would do once I see a new question, once I turn the page to a new question, is read the instructions for that question. It goes without saying, but so many students leave it out or kind of skip through it and don't read the instructions fully. You need to be aware of what you need to do to score the marks exactly, as precisely as possible, of course. And you need to be aware of how many marks there are available for each of those questions, too, because that really guides you. Generally, the amount of information you've got to give or the number of details you have to give is completely in line with the number of marks available for that question. So if a question's worth 2 marks, you'd give 2 bits of information. If a question is worth 3 marks, you give 3 pieces of detail, and so on. You need to familiarize yourself with the technique required for each of the question types. The other video I made that takes you through each of the most common question types one by one and gives you the techniques that I would really recommend for how to answer each and every one of those question types is something that you should definitely watch if you want to get familiar with the kind of techniques required in the listening exam. There is a lot of overlap in terms of question types between the listening exam and the reading paper too. So yeah, if you're familiar with the kind of techniques needed for the reading paper, that can copy across to some extent for the listening exam too. Although of course the medium is very different. You're not reading texts and doing comprehensions based on those. You're listening to an audio and doing a comprehension based on that audio instead. Make sure, though, that you learn topic-specific vocabulary. Again, it's something students attempted to skip over or not learn fully, but make sure that you don't miss out any topics when you're doing this too. The topics for your particular exam board should be found on your exam board's website. There's a lot of overlap in terms of which topics come up from exam board to exam board. And resources like Quizlet and many others can be very useful for learning vocab for GCSE and iGCSE. Make sure to do it thoroughly and try not to leave out any topics make sure that you know each of the topics, especially harder ones such as the environment or perhaps social issues, as thoroughly as you can. Some students will be a lot stronger on certain topics than on others, so try and avoid that. And last but definitely not least, exam technique makes a huge difference. That's why it's in capital letters here, because it makes such a big difference. It's something that I mention a lot, that many teachers will say a lot, but it can't really be stated enough, because exam technique does make such a big difference to marks. The best students or the best ones at German do not necessarily get the top marks because exam technique and other factors come into it a lot too. Okay, a few more tips here on the listening exam in general. So to prepare for the listening exam, I recommend practicing understanding the German accent as spoken by natives. There are not too many different countries where German is spoken, unlike, say, French or Spanish, or quite a few other languages, perhaps. So try and get accustomed to that accent. Of course, you're not going to hear native speakers speaking at full speed in your GCSE exams. That would be ridiculous. They will be slowed down. The speed does increase. The speed of the audio obviously increases as you go through the test. But understanding the German accent, being used to it, and being used to the sound symbol correspondence, so what sounds are made by certain letters or combinations of letters, can really help. And any way that you can familiarize yourself with the accent can be beneficial. Even more fun ways like music or films. I definitely wouldn't focus just on that at all for your revision, but it can be a good supplement and a more fun break or a funner way of learning too. Listen out for synonyms as well. The reason why is because they will often not use the exact words that are written in the answer, in the list of answers. So you should listen out for synonyms as well. Just because you don't hear the exact words written in your answer, that doesn't mean that that is not the correct answer, because they may have phrased it a bit differently or used some synonyms instead. So watch out for that. You get to hear the audio, everything in the audio twice, of course, 3 times for the dictation section. So try and make the most of this. There are various strategies available to benefit from that as much as possible. If you don't catch something the first time, try not to panic. It isn't necessarily the end of the world, because you could hear it again and you could somewhat rescue the situation. Try and make notes or write down as much as you can. Yeah, or perhaps think through or eliminate wrong answers instead. That can still help to get the marks. Time management is really important for the listening paper and for other papers too. For the listening exam, your time is somewhat dictated by the audio, really, because all the examiner would do is, or the teacher would do, is play the audio and then just sit back and invigilate. The audio will do the rest. So you've got to follow the audio in terms of your time, but do make sure, for example, that you read the instructions for every new question before the question itself or before the audio starts for that question. Try and read through the question fully as well. Try and read through all of the answer options so you understand what to listen out for. Those things are really important. And if you do get time to check, which you should do right at the end of the paper, then using that as well as you can is also beneficial. And the best way to practice is normally going to be practicing in exam conditions, mimicking the exam as closely as you can, using past paper materials, ideally for your exam board. When it gets closer and closer to the exam, say if you're a month or two away from the final GCSEs, then I would really focus on practicing like this in exam conditions with past paper materials, not allowing yourself to look up words, and recreating that exam feeling as much as possible. Okay, in terms of exam technique, which is something I've stressed so much already in this video, these are some parts of exam technique that can really trip students up and that students can find quite difficult to implement. So make sure you read every question and the possible answers fully. Like I said, I try and do that before the question has even started, before the audio for that question has even started. You often have a little bit of time. It's only going to be some seconds. But if you can use that to your benefit and read through the question and all of the possible answers fully, that means that you're primed. You're ready for when the audio actually starts for that question. Check your work very thoroughly after completing every question. You should get some time to check over everything that you've written down. Once the final question is finished, you might get a minute or so to check over everything that you've written, and you should definitely use that, of course, too. But after you've completed every question, it's worth glancing back at your answers, making sure you haven't left anything out or made any silly mistakes, for example, that you've answered every question, things like that. Because remember, you hear everything in the audio twice, but you can't listen to it again. Once that question is done and you've heard that audio twice, you're not going to hear it again later on in the exam. So when you're checking, even right at the end, you should do so. You should check as much as you can, but be aware that you won't be able to hear that audio again for the previous questions. You do still get to hear the audio twice, though, and make the most of that as much as you can. So people have different strategies for how to deal with that. The fact that you get to hear everything in the audio twice or even 3 times if it's the dictation task. So many people will listen for the gist, so the general feeling or general message that's being conveyed the first time, and they'll listen out in more detail or for more precise details the second time. That's not what I personally would do, but I know that it has worked well for some students in my experience. The second strategy could be writing in a non-confirmed answer the first time. So the first time you hear the audio, you might get a feel for what the answer is. You might want to write a note to yourself as to what you think the answer could be, or just start to eliminate answers that definitely don't seem correct to you. And the second time you get to listen to the audio, you may want to write in that final answer. So don't write your final answer the first time you hear the audio. unless you're really, really sure that that is correct and that you're not going to change your mind after hearing the audio again. That can work very well. That's something I did, and many other students do very well too. There are various strategies available. Whichever one you use, try and make the most of getting to hear everything twice. Remember that even if you don't catch it all the first time, you do get another go, of course. Um, yeah, and practice those strategies so that you're as used to putting them into practice as possible. Check how many marks there are for every question. That goes without saying, but it really helps to know what you've got to write or how much information you've got to provide. Answer in the same language the question itself is written in. This is a general rule for all these GCSE and iGCSE language papers. You always write the answer in the same language that the question itself is written in. There shouldn't be any doubt whatsoever because the paper should make it very clear which question you've got to write your answer in. And most of them will be multiple choice in the listening papers, anyways. But if there's any doubt, just follow this rule. And lastly, do not leave a question blank. This can be really infuriating as a tutor, but many students will not have a go, maybe because they're afraid of getting the answer wrong, but there's absolutely no harm in having a guess, especially if it's a multiple choice type question. Because whenever you've got a limited number of options to choose from, there's still usually a reasonable chance of guessing the answer correctly. And it's very easy to have a guess as well. You've just got to write down, the option that you think it could be. So don't leave out multiple choice questions. Always have a go. Even non-multiple choice questions, I would have a go and try and write in what you think the right answer is in English or German, for example, rather than leaving it blank. Okay, that is an introduction to an overview of exam technique for the listening exam for German GCSE and iGCSE. And now there's just a brief quiz to test your understanding of all of that. And how well you know how to approach the German GCSE and iGCSE listening exam. So there are 4 questions here. Number 1 is, how significant exactly is exam technique for the listening exam? So what is the significance of exam technique for your GCSE listening exam? Okay, let me show the answer. As with much of the German GCSE and iGCSE papers, exam technique can make a really big difference to the marks that someone scores. And so understanding the different techniques you need for every single question type can really be helpful. I would check out the video that I made that takes you through each of the common question types one by one for the listening exam. Question number 2, true or false? You'll never have to write out an answer in the listening exam. So this is basically saying that all questions in the listening paper would be multiple choice in some way, or choosing from a certain number of options. Okay, the answer to this is false. Not every single question is multiple choice or requires the student simply to tick boxes. You might be required to write out answers yourself, either in English or in German. Most questions do tend to be ticking boxes or multiple choice in nature, but be aware that you can be required certainly to write out answers too. Number 3 then, true or false, you will hear all audios in the listening exam except for the dictation task exactly twice. Okay, 2 more seconds. Okay, now let me reveal the answer for this. This one is true. The only exception is the dictation task, in which you would hear every audio thrice or 3 times. But the original statement was true then, because the dictation task was already mentioned as an exception. And question 4, why is it useful to get used to hearing the authentic German accent as spoken by natives, ideally? Get a few more seconds to think. Okay, here comes the answer. So this is useful, of course, because that's the accent that you will hear in the audios for the listening exam for GCSE or iGCSE German. Hearing this accent repeatedly can help you to know how to identify words, how to recognize exactly what they're saying and where one word ends and the next word starts, and also to coordinate symbols and sounds, sound symbol correspondence, which is the aim of things like the dictation task, for example, but useful overall in general for your listening paper. Okay, if you've got questions about anything at all in the video, or if you'd like to find out about more personalized help and lessons, which I do offer too, you can get in touch with me through email or via Facebook or Instagram. I post regularly on social media pretty much every day, actually, on Facebook, Instagram, and even LinkedIn, sharing my passion for languages with people, hopefully motivating them and pushing them to learn more and more languages, and giving them the tools and techniques to make that possible as well, and to make it as enjoyable as possible. I do post a lot about exams on these platforms too, how you can prepare for exams like GCSEs and iGCSEs in particular. And yeah, go in there feeling as confident as you can. So do follow me on each of those platforms. I do have many free resources available, including for German. Those could be very useful. And I do one-to-one classes, group classes, courses, and quite a lot more. So if you'd like to find out more of any of this, just get in touch.